Hey, are you subscribed to my new channel, Feminine Strategy and Lifestyle? Subscribe now for one-of-a-kind content on femininity, leveling up, and dating. The link is in the description box. So in this video, I want to talk to my ladies about the complaints that I see coming from other Black women about Black femininity content on YouTube. And listen, this video is highly requested. I've been getting emails, messages on Instagram about this. And so I decided to go ahead and cover it. And I just want to talk about why some of the feedback coming from Black women just doesn't make sense. I want to talk about how some women are heavily exaggerating the message, the Black femininity content, because they don't like the messenger or they don't identify with the message or they feel inadequate in some way when listening to the message. It's different reasons why they're responding this way. So I want to talk about that. And I also just want to make it clear that I am not defending any Black femininity advice that is extremely unrealistic or rigid, because I don't believe in that either. On my second channel, Feminine Strategy and Lifestyle, if you haven't followed, definitely go follow. The link is in the description box. On that channel, I do talk about different types of femininity, and I talk about women embracing both their feminine and masculine qualities, because I feel that both are necessary. And I don't believe in this 24/7 unbotheredness or forced happiness that's being associated with Black femininity. And I already talked about that on this channel and the other channel as well. So, I don't agree with all of the femininity content either. Let's just be clear about that. I'm only speaking for myself and my femininity content only, and why I think the Black femininity content in general is getting pushback from other Black women. And overall, this video is not to prove anything to them or try to change their minds. They are entitled to their beliefs. They can make as many videos as they want pushing back against the message. It's perfectly fine. I'm not trying to change their minds or control their content. They are not my concern. My main concern and the reason for this video is to actually bring comfort and peace of mind to the Black women who are currently on their feminine journeys and being low-key and high-key shamed by other Black women for using femininity to get some of the things they want out of life, or being called a wannabe white woman for taking femininity advice, or being shamed in general for taking femininity advice on YouTube or on social media, and for not knowing certain things about femininity or feminine strategy, which I think is ridiculous, because every Black woman didn't have the same upbringing. I don't think that Black women are inherently masculine in any way. However, many of us haven't been taught how to use every facet of our femininity to our advantage. And I think we all know that strategy or social climbing or etiquette or fashion or anything like that, those aren't the definition of femininity, but you can use femininity in those areas to win, which is why that kind of content is on femininity channels. For those of you who are pretending to be confused, I decided to go ahead and explain that. The concepts aren't hard, ladies, and I believe some Black women are being literal and difficult about this on purpose. I really do. And I see a lot of women saying, oh, well, I'm a woman, I have a womb, therefore I'm already feminine. I don't have to be taught. Meanwhile, Black women are some of the most women who are making some of the worst decisions with their wombs, and they're wasting their feminine power on the wrong people and the wrong situations. But they're at the same time, they're saying, oh, I don't need to be taught. All I have to do is be a woman. And it's like, no, it's more to it. Feminine strategy can help any woman. Learning how to use your feminine power as a woman can help anybody. And listen, it's not our fault as Black women. It's not all our fault. We've been socialized to pretty much be different variations of dehumanizing archetypes, and we've only been taught to use one or a few sides of ourselves as women. And I've explained why that is so problematic in several videos. But I think because Black women are so used to one narrative or just one or a few narratives, we're very, very closed-minded to something different. And even if it will help us, but you guys can keep complaining, but the Black femininity crew is here to stay. Okay? Black women can have a variety of interests and representation like every other group of women, and that includes includes the femininity sector. I love that it's taken off. I love it. And honestly, it's more than just black women out here taking and giving femininity advice on social media. The black femininity sector is growing in the black female sector, but it's still overwhelmingly non-black. So I'm not sure why people are acting like the advice is only being directed at black women. That's kind of weird too. Again, the exaggerations, it's crazy. But, I think that people should allow black women to be a part of this sector like any other sector. If white and Latina women can learn from and teach women who look like them to be more feminine and get millions, literally millions of views on YouTube, so can we. So can we. And I know some black femininity content creators are just jumping on the bandwagon. They're very surface level. They're just repeating what they've heard me and other people say. But you know what? The more the merrier. And I say that because I think it helps balance the scale in terms of representation. Because the black woman narrative we see now that's overwhelmingly being pushed is overdone. And it's time for another narrative. And it's going to take more than one or two black women to create that, And if the warrior princess black woman narrative can exist and black women can embrace that, then we can embrace a different narrative. It just is what it is. We're here to stay. We're allowed to be in the femininity sector. So certain black women, you're just going to have to deal with it, period. Now, on to the meat of the video. So I will never say that some of our ideas of gender roles and femininity today as black women aren't Eurocentric or aren't rooted in white supremacy at all. I would never say that none of it is performative. That would be a lie. It would just be a lie. And I acknowledge more than anyone on my platform how black women trying to conform to Eurocentric standards is a problem. But even I'm not so extreme that I'm going to reject all of the concepts of quote unquote Eurocentric femininity that I and many of you that have taken, certain advice have used to your advantage. I'm just not willing to reject all of that in the name of being 100% Afrocentric. And I feel the same way about certain respectability politics because, I get a lot of negative pushback or negative feedback from that as well. And listen, I'll keep saying it, but I'm going to use the respectability politics that work for me and don't compromise me, that I feel don't compromise me as a black woman. And sure, performative femininity, respectability politics, that won't make the world treat me like a white woman. Absolutely not. But I think we all know that. I think we all know that. We don't need to be reminded of that. And I'm sure most of us giving femininity advice aren't promising that black women get the same exact privileges as white women. So I don't know why they keep coming up. It's just, again, the exaggeration. But do parts of performative femininity work in a black woman's favor? Absolutely. Many of us are living proof. And I keep seeing black women say, oh, well, you're only going to get crumbs and you don't get the full access and you don't receive the full benefits. What's the alternative, sis? What's the alternative in, your Afrocentric land of femininity? Are you offering something better? And is fighting for something better benefiting you? Begging white people for a bigger slice of the pie. Is that benefiting you? Is it benefiting you to beg black men who ain't about to do nothing to join in with you to tear down all these oppressive systems and, build something to replace it with? Because that's what's going to need to happen. Is adhering to only Afrocentric standards benefiting your life right now? I mean, are y'all going to stop wearing heels too because they aren't Afrocentric enough? And because it's performative femininity? Does everything a black woman does have to be 100% Afrocentric or non-performative? Do any other race of women or any race of people operate that way? The entire world takes bits and pieces from different cultures, and especially from black culture. They capitalize from it. And sure, we complain about it and we talk about how wrong it is. But guess what? They're going to do it anyway. They're still going to do it. So black women are the only women who have to be 100% Afrocentric all the time and play by a different set of rules? No, absolutely not. And I find it interesting that, like me, these Afrocentric femininity black women, they like to cherry pick in this conversation. And they like to only get rid of the Eurocentric standards that they don't like, right? And they like to keep the parts that they do like, but they don't realize that that's what they're doing. I do it too, but that they don't realize that that's what they're doing too. And it's the same with Afrocentric femininity. We cherry pick based on what we like and what fits our narrative. You know, talking about Afrocentric femininity, but defending the right to wear Eurocentric looking wigs, it makes absolutely no sense. And, you know, I tend to stay away from the Afrocentric topic because Africa is a huge continent. It's a huge place. It's very diverse in terms of culture and tradition. There are different countries, there are different tribes. And, you know, for some reason we like to paint Africa with a broad brush. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to point out some traditions that were common in various pre-colonial indigenous African societies. And I say before colonialism because, you know, Black women, we keep complaining about how we're not embracing our Afrocentric ideas of femininity. So let's take it back before there was any European influence. And the only reason I'm doing this is to show you how silly this argument is. Now, it's true, based on what I read, before being colonized, many, if not most, African societies were matrilineal or of an egalitarian structure. The women were not seen as subordinate to men. The genders had rather a complementary relationship dynamic. And the women also held leadership positions and political positions, just like the men. There were women who were chiefs and women who occasionally fought in battle. But what I noticed is that in many tribes, there were still similar gender roles that we see today. And I'm not directly comparing pre-colonial indigenous African societies to the present day or directly comparing it to white patriarchy. I'm just pointing out that certain gender roles seem to be natural no matter the time period. And during that time, men were the hunters and they went to war and traveled long distance for trade, while the women stayed home or close to home and cared for the children. And some tribes even had private male societies that actually excluded women from political processes. And the women did work. They did agriculture labor. They made and sold their own crafts. They were consulted in internal political affairs, but all external affairs and most of the physical labor was handled mostly by the men. So that is something that is still the same today. And we've all heard of the Black female warriors. As someone who has an Afrocentric mother, I grew up hearing about Nefertiti, Queen Amina. I don't even remember the other ones' names, but I grew up learning about all of the female warriors, the Black female warriors. And of course, many of us have learned about the Dahomey woman warriors since the Black Panther came out. And that is a part of our history as Black women. You know, I would never downplay it. I would never shun that. And I think the warrior archetype, as well as the queen archetype, I think that's necessary for Black women in some instances. I don't believe that Black women have to completely get rid of those to be feminine or have to be docile all the time and never have an opinion, you know, to be feminine. I'm not of that belief system, okay? I have some warrior in me, let's be clear. And some Black women will have more of the warrior spirit or queen spirit than others, and that's fine. But just like our ancestors, every woman wasn't a warrior, every woman wasn't a queen. That is true today. And that's perfectly okay as well. Not every Black woman wants to be a warrior princess or is meant to be that. And that's what a lot of Black women need to understand. So, you know, if some Black women, I mean, and I'm only saying this because y'all keep talking about what's Afrocentric. So, you know, I had to bring in the history with it. But if some Black women want to be domestics instead of warriors, that doesn't make us Eurocentric. Okay, that's part of African history as well. And as far as patriarchy, when you talk about the Moorish Empire specifically, and I'm sure many of you heard about this through Hidden Colors, you know, Hidden Colors is real popular, so we've seen it, but that was built on a patriarchal system. And that's why a lot of Black men, you know, really like identifying with that part of African history, you know, and they had the harems of the white women and polygamy or polygyny, you know, a lot of Black men like to identify with that, right? And so they were built on a patriarchal system, and many of the Moorish women were domestics and concubines while the men ruled and did most of the fighting. And I know that there's a debate on whether or not the Moors are Black or brown, but I'm not here to argue that. Okay. My point is, based on history, the Black and brown man had a patriarchy before, your any European influence. So this idea that as Black or African people that we used to live in this 100% egalitarian society where all Black women were warriors and never domestics and all we did was fight on the front lines. Like, if you were to listen to people talk about our history, that's what you would think. But that's false. Like, sure, there were women who were on the front lines and that fought in battle. Sure, the women had their own agency. But I mean, that's pretty much what a lot of the femininity channels are preaching right now. So it's like, I feel like we're more Afrocentric than you guys are giving us credit for. A lot of us are saying, hey, get your own money, get your own bag. But, let your man do the lifting, the heavy lifting. Let your man pull most of the weight. And, when I'm reading about these pre-colonial indigenous African societies, the men pull their weight. And it's like, what's the problem of Black women today saying the same thing? And my point is, certain activities back then were designated to a certain gender. And I mean, it's okay if we do that now. It's not that serious. I promise you it's not. And Black people, we really like to cling to this king and queen warrior princess narrative when there were other people in the hierarchy. Not all of us were kings and queens, people. There were subordinates, there were superiors, there was a hierarchy, there were rules, there was structure, there was infighting, there was abuse as well. We weren't just one big ass happy Black African family. So, being Afrocentric doesn't mean that there's no structure or etiquette or definitions or gender roles. That's just not the way of the world, you guys. No matter the race and no matter the time period. And I do feel that I need to highlight that there were still gender roles, because I think that's a problem a lot of Black women have, a lot of the anti-femininity Black women. I think that they don't like structure, and they don't like definitions or gender roles, period. They don't like any of that. And it seems like y'all don't want the man to have any control whatsoever, which again is completely unrealistic. And I understand not trusting Black men specifically to have control. I totally get it. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just not talking about Black men here. Y'all are like that with any race of men. Anytime we talk about, hey, I want a provider, I want him to pull most of the weight, do most of the heavy lifting. Y'all start talking about the 1950s as if, a lot of us femininity content creators are actually encouraging that, when most of us are not. I mean, I haven't heard everybody's content on here, but I know that most of us are saying, get your own money, get your own bag, secure yourself, of course, but make sure he has equal or more than you do. And it's not just about men, but sometimes, you need to know when to be strategic and shut up sometimes and not talk yourself out of opportunities. It's not just in terms of, talking yourself out of hypergamy or talking yourself out of being provided for, but just out of a lot of stuff. And Black women do that a lot, more than we'd like to admit. It's really not that complicated. And, if you don't want to conform to Eurocentric gender roles or white patriarchy, fine. But historically, Africans had their own set of rules, and they still do. Now, when it comes to Eurocentric versus Afrocentric beauty standards and beauty rituals, and I'm bringing this up because how women present themselves physically go hand in hand with femininity. It's not just about having a womb. You can disagree all you want, but outward appearance is tied with femininity and masculinity, depending on the gender. And again, it's been that way before any European influence, you guys. And the first thing tied to this is pretty obvious, and I don't really want to go here, but if you truly want to embrace Afrocentric femininity in terms of beauty and style, I would think you would want to get rid of the straight, long European looking wigs and weave. And it's interesting that in these conversations about Eurocentric femininity, the very non-Afrocentric looking hair that a lot of Black women like to wear today, it never comes up. In fact, we're always defending our right to wear it. But if getting rid of Eurocentric standards of beauty and femininity is the goal, why are you even defending your right to wear European looking hair on your head? Like I said, it's cherry picking. That's what it is. And listen, I don't want to hear it. I know ancient Egyptians wore wigs, okay? That is like the biggest argument. I've been hearing that for years, right? But they don't look like the wigs that most black women wear today. Let's not be intellectually dishonest, you guys. The wigs we wear today are not African Egyptian inspired. They're not. And outside of the wigs, I mean, I don't see a lot of black women embracing many pre-colonial African hairstyles at all. Maybe braids and bantu knots, but that's, styles like that. But that's about it. And again, different tribes did different things. As Cola Booth, shout out to Cola Booth. She told me a couple years ago when we had our little disagreement. Shout out to the OG Cola Booth. I love her. I really do. But she told me that before colonialism and any European influence, the fertility goddesses that were worshipped in some African tribes were bald. They didn't have any hair, and they were the ultimate symbol of femininity. And many upper class African women wore bald heads. Some wore braided wigs or hairdresses, but some shaved their heads off. So, and I know some black women don't mind having no hair, but I don't see a lot of y'all wanting to convert to that. All these Afrocentric chicks or whatever. Usually they have weave in their head or some big afro or something. They ain't trying to shave their head bald. And I will acknowledge that in other tribes, African tribes, thick long hair or big well kept done hair on a woman that represented high status and fertility and health, your marriage status and all that stuff. So like I said, Africa is a big place, and so there are different cultures that did different things. So it just depends on what tribe you want to choose. But a lot of y'all get on me about preferring long natural hair when in a lot of indigenous African societies, long hair meant fertility and health and status. And so if I want long, natural, neat looking hair and done hair, that's actually not Eurocentric at all. Sorry, boo boo. They were getting that scalp together on the motherland. And if you didn't have your hair done, or if it looked unkempt or whatever, then they was looking at you like you was crazy. So I guess I'm not so Eurocentric after all when it comes to, my preference for long natural hair. Again, it depends on what African tribe you want to identify with. And that's why this argument is so stupid, because none of us, literally none of us, not even the women that are complaining, are willing to really keep it all the way Afrocentric. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. And I'm sorry, I don't know the names of the tribes offhand. I'm just going by things I've read and, seen pictures of or learned from my mom and all the hoteps in my family. Because, the hoteps, they love talking all this Afrocentric stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm not shitting on my history or anything like that. I think we have a beautiful history. Parts of it are very, very beautiful. But, it's like y'all not trying to go all the way back there. And I know you're not. My point is, if the idea is to embrace a more Afrocentric version of femininity or Afrocentric standards of beauty, I would think that the women who are pushing back against the Black femininity movement would be trying to get rid of these European looking lace fronts. And if they're going to advocate wearing hair weave, do what the ancient Africans did, wear the weave and the wigs that look closer to your hair texture, like they did before Africa was colonized. Why not? But see, again, they cherry pick what part of Afrocentric femininity and Afrocentric beauty standards to identify with. And that's my point. We all pick and choose based on our beliefs and what we feel benefits us. Okay. So the women who think they're all high and mighty and Afrocentric, you're no better than we are. You're not. You cherry pick just like we do. And Black women, if you're masculine or non-binary and the femininity advice you don't identify with it, stand in that. Stand in your masculinity or being non-binary. It doesn't make you any less than the women who are listening to my content, my femininity content. I'm sure you have a space that's for you as well. I mean, there's a space for everything at this point. Other women's labels and what they choose to do with their time and their interests, and, if they're learning something that you don't need to learn, that shouldn't make you upset. That shouldn't make you feel inadequate. That shouldn't make you embarrassed or anything, because again, it's not just Black women who occupy this space. Just understand that every Black woman doesn't identify the same with the same things, and understand that some of us just want more balanced representation and a bigger variety of spaces that include our interests. And I always say that my femininity content isn't for everyone. And what's happening is that other black women are projecting their beliefs on women who it is for. And I do have a problem with that. And they're telling them that if you take any of the femininity advice, you're putting yourself in a subordinate position to men when you are actually doing what you want to do. And you feel content in that position because it's less of a burden to you. These women think that because they feel like performing femininity is at the expense of their own happiness and well-being, that you should feel that way too, even if you don't and you're completely happy. Or because they feel like the advice means that they have to turn into somebody that they're not, you should feel that way too, even though you're improving. You're improving yourself with the advice for the better, and it's not hard for you to implement the advice. And while all of these are valid concerns from the other side, the women who the content is for, they don't feel like it's that complicated as some of you are making it. Some of the detractors are intentionally complicating femininity content, in my opinion. And even though femininity is multifaceted, those who are intentionally making the definition of femininity extra vague with no cutoff are being disingenuous. It's just as bad, almost just as bad as the people who act like that blackness has no cutoff. It's almost just the same as people like that, acting like black can look like any and everything. We know what femininity is. Yeah, there are gray areas, it's nuanced, but we all in all, we know what the universal definition of femininity is. Let's stop playing dumb, you guys. Let's stop over exaggerating. We're smarter than this. We are. And suggesting that certain universal aspects of femininity are quote unquote white, that's absolutely ridiculous. It's a dig on black women and it's anti-black in and of itself. So you may want to check that too before you call somebody anti-black, okay? And to address the argument that black men don't have masculinity content, and so why are black women, pushing out content like this? That's a weak argument to me because black men actually do need masculinity content on YouTube. It would be nice if there were more black men on here teaching masculinity to black men and boys, because that is something only a masculine man can teach. It's not our fault as black femininity creators that black men aren't teaching their sons or other black men manhood. That's on them. Non-black men, on the other hand, they do have thriving channels helping men with masculinity. Non-black women have thriving femininity channels. So I just think that before black people talk about what is and what isn't out there and how things are just a black thing, please do your research. Get out of your little black bubble, your, black YouTube sector bubble, and look around. Look on social media. This is a really big industry. The masculinity, femininity videos is big. A lot of people are tuning into that type of content. And it's a big world out there, you guys. It's important to research what other races are doing before we go saying something is just a black thing or just a white thing, okay? Black women just started occupying the femininity sector online, and we have a right to be there like any other group of women. So just deal with it. So my point is, ladies, don't let the detractors throw you off your path, because that's par for the course when black women, especially black women, specifically go against the status quo. A lot of them aren't used to seeing black women like this. It is what it is. They're not used to hearing us talk about femininity, hypergamy. They're not used to it, ladies. So it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people. It is what it is. And that's why I said, don't let that discourage you. That means you're doing something right. No shift from the status quo or revolution, if you want to call it that, or movement. It never happens peacefully. The pushback is expected. So you just kind of have to ignore it and continue on your journey, level up, have fun with it, and do you. This is why I say you can't share everything with everybody, because this is what happens, and it is certain black women who are also invested in the current paradigm, because being a princess warrior, being the strong, independent black woman is their identity. It's their whole identity. They can't imagine anything else. And it's part of how they get their validation as well. And it's been so ingrained in them that they feel lost without it. So that's another reason. So of course they don't want to give it up. Of course they're mad at other black women who don't want to be that. But if the femininity advice works for you and not them, it's really not your problem, black women, at this point. It's not. As long as you're doing well on your journey, and the changes are benefiting you, or you simply believe in the message, you may not need the advice, but you simply believe in the message, that's all that matters. Don't allow them to make their issues with the black femininity movement your burden, because it's not. So that's all I have to say about this. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section, and I'll catch up with you in the next one.